Great job. I thought we'd use this last conversation to sort of talk about moving the research agenda forward, the educational efforts forward, and I think there've been a number of research ideas that have kind of come up during the conversations over the last 2 days, which I think I'd love for us to also talk about. But before we jump into that, actually, Kelleann, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts, and this is this larger conversation about MOOCs, what do we do with all of the material that you gathered? And is there a research potential in all of that?
There definitely is. Yeah, and that I've been talking with my colleagues about it because we did a little survey at the end. Coursera did a survey, which we didn't know they were going to do. So we have a lot of information from that. So we definitely need to, and because we ask all the students to tag their Geodesign challenge in one of those 5 categories, or we put other, because we know there are others. And so, yeah, and where they are on the map, there's oodles of information that I need a clone. I need my clone. I need a little more time. But yeah, there's definitely things that could be written and shared about that further than what I did today.
Yeah. So I don't know. Are there privacy concerns, or can you upload a lot of that material to a site that could be accessible?
You know, that's a good. I think if I just redacted their names, I don't see why we couldn't, and we can just say where they're from. Which I realized when I showed them quickly today. I don't know if I showed any names. Maybe there were a couple of names there, but yeah. Great.
Research, Carl. I know you've got a lot of thoughts. So
I have personal thoughts, and then I have systems thoughts based on you guys. For myself personally, I'm almost fully booked into November. But let me tell you what I'm doing, because I think that for a person of my age and experience, there are some things that I'm better at, and there are some things that I have no knowledge of, and I'm not prepared to learn City Engine. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to do other things. So this is what I want to do. I want to teach teachers on every continent. All right?
Get a MOOC. Get a MOOC.
No, I don't. I actually don't want to do that, because I think that what Kelleann has done is excellent for people who become interested, but it doesn't teach them how, why, how, and what, when, where. Okay? Because her end product is what's the problem, all right? Not how do you get to the solution. So I'm much more interested in running workshops where some people participate over the internet and some are there live and they're exchanging their experience. And I've done this now for about 5 years, about once a month for the last 2 years. Tess and I, and sometimes Mike and sometimes Stephen, have gone someplace and we've gotten faculty from 14 or 15 schools together for 3 days, and we say, let's do one, and it's on a real problem in their place. But interspersed with that is, how do you teach it? What's the exercise? How do you get your students to produce ideas that range from policies to projects? We're going to the University of Georgia on Sunday, and we're going to the University of Washington a month later. We're going to Minnesota. I'm going to be in Madrid. I'm going to be in Costa Rica. So I do that, and I can't do it more than once a month. Why? Because I want to spend a couple of days on the beach, and I want to relax. All right? The second thing, I want to help.
You want it all.
No, I do. The second thing is, I'm really interested in the idea of designing with diagrams. So I'm very attracted. I mean, Steve and I have talked about this for years, okay? So the ways of designing I'm working on with Rishi, but the smartness of diagrams I want to work on with somebody. In other words, I draw a diagram, I want to know more about it, and I want the diagrams to locate themselves, right? Things like that. So that's a second thing. The third thing is, I've had 2 conversations with Noel Cressy, and we've talked about the idea of doing a geodesign study to be the stressor on his global modeling. And to do a design for, let's say, 12 cities of a 1 to 2 million growing to 5 to 10 million, and then looking at the global impact and then looking down at what the city really has to do for policy and projects. And that includes, for example, doing random designs. doing best case designs to worst case designs, and then asking a really interesting question. Can the best possible design at the scale of a city of 5 million make any difference from the worst possible design to a global model? And if it does, that's important, really important. But if it doesn't, it means do lots of little projects, try to make people happy, and wait for the crash.
Do you want us to respond to that?
What do you think of that, Jack?
Yeah, that's great.
We're all
I think
mic'd.
we're all
That's yours. That's your personal mic.
We're mic'd.
And as for one more, as for Stephen and Mike's presentation, I thought that, I mean, the fact that it's based on my diagram, I appreciate because I work hard on figuring out how to diagram things. But what's really interesting is that it's an open diagram, all right? And what you need to do is figure out what your interests and capabilities are, fit yourself into that diagram, and then see who you want to email. And then invent something, right? It doesn't take an organization nobody's promoting research, nobody's funding research. You have to figure out how to do it. But then, at these conferences, you have to tell us what worked, but more important, what didn't work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think your diagram is also really beautiful, and it also suggests there may be subgroups within our community on those different parts of that Venn diagram that we might also explore in the future.
You know, I don't know those of you who are familiar with the idea of maps of science, but this is actually something that has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, which are really kind of semantic network diagrams, if you will, trying to locate science topics next to each other based on various measures of proximity and so on. And I find them quite beautiful. They're very beautiful ways of looking at what we know. But the last 3 I looked at, I couldn't find geodesign anywhere. I couldn't even figure out where to put it. And so I think that's a challenge that we have ahead of us.
Wasn't this the idea of an ontology, right?
Yes.
Just starting the links and the connections and adding in all the pieces. And you talked about health and economics. Ecosystem services are part of health. Economics is a science.
There are many linkages.
So I think they're in there, but you start teasing them out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that could be for instance, a framework for organizing track discussions in a summit such as this one. So we could get people that find themselves more interested in public participation issues, for instance, to cluster, see if it works.
Right.
And if you find yourself intrigued in any of this, just email geodesignresearch@gmail.com and it'll get to us.
Great.
Ooh, there's another way.
Good. Jack, you've brought this big map with you. What did you have in mind with it?
Hit us over the head.
A game of cricket?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's on paper, remember.
It seems to me that you guys unconsciously are trying to manage a research agenda for geodesign. And you're all participants, right? So what is the global research agenda for this thing we call geodesign? And each of us have had different experiences of trying to manage research over long periods of time. And there's some, I don't have any wisdom to share except real practical stuff. So I have 3 or 4 that stick in my mind. One of them is I usually have a focus on application of it. So if you look at research in an abstract way, Michael, who is not here, Michael Goodchild, ran the national research agenda for geography and GIS for many years. And the first principle that I watched him do was he was very inclusive. So it wasn't just at Santa Barbara. He brought in other research universities, 2 other centers, Buffalo and Maine, but then he opened it up as it evolved along wider and wider, and he got enormous results. So openness and inclusiveness is one of the principles, being open for new ideas. And certainly this thing as it's existed here for, is it 6 years or 5 years? We had 5 years of this.
It's 6, yeah.
Is it 6? I thought it was 6, yeah. Somebody said 5, but it's 6. You're getting old.
I know.
So that's one principle, is inclusiveness, and that's inclusiveness in interactions and dialogue. Another one is application focus. I think that's something that really makes it good. Yeah. And acknowledgement through the prizes and through papers and publishing. Another one is some leadership, and you guys particularly have given leadership. I'm speaking really to all of you, in a way, leadership to nurturing this emerging thing. And another one is keeping it a little vague. You know, I remember the first year everybody was into definition. Remember that? Writing the definition, this is what we mean, and like that. And certainly these diagrams help. But I also think there's a dimension of evolutionary research that it's important to keep it loosey-goosey, you know, and everything in a way is emerging along. In your time that you saw, that you were here, you saw that kind of emerging over in building M&M. You know, it's kind of like the dogs are always barking, but the caravan keeps marching along. That kind of a philosophy for guiding research, and then lots of communication through publication and showing off, and you know, and we're all motivated to kind of do that in our own way, but certainly documenting what and sharing what, so that we build on each other's work is very important beyond just this meeting room. And what you're trying to do here, I think, with this website and tweeting and other aspects that are really important. And I like this. I like this community that you guys have formed, and I like acknowledging that it's not just our meeting, but it's the evolution of the research and knowledge about this domain, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's valuable to you. It's sort of a perspective of trying to, and also redundancy is important. I mean, here you guys know a little bit about building M&M. There's about 700 developers there, but there's also a development center in Zurich and in China and in Edinburgh and in Wales and in Melbourne and in some other places. And what I find is that there's sometimes redundancy or a little bit of competition between different teams that are working on the same thing. I'm using that as an example, and people will accuse me, well, that's kind of wasteful, and we don't have much money to waste, frankly. But on the other hand, some interesting creative activities come out of this diversity, and then interaction and sharing and competition, even within our little domain. So
A.R. Fisher might have called it replication.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that's
It's a
really
good
right.
thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
The second thing I wanted to mention is what this map, and this map is a map of the world. This is the
Can we hold it
U.S. Yeah, you could if you wanted. It's not what I expected, but this I think is only the United States.
Yep, that's
Is
the
it?
United States.
This is a piece of work that
Maybe
was.
that's the rest of it. Is that the rest of the world?
Here's the rest of the
That's
world
just
over
the
here.
Africa piece. This is outdated. It's been. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful map when you first look at it. What does it mean? Roger Sayer, Randy Vaughn, Noel has started to be involved in this, myself, have taken multiple layers at 250 meters for the entire planet. This is a data set. I think there's 28 layers that are going to be available on ArcGIS Online in a couple of weeks, and attempted to try to classify them into what we would call segments or facets. Somebody would call them facets. There's roughly 500 million polygons on the planet. Start with that. Through various techniques, we got it down to a couple thousand types. So most people don't really understand where this goes, but my good friend who knows demographic segmentation understood it right away. You know, there's 67 different types of Americans. One of them is laptops and lattes.
Yeah, right. The tapestry.
The tapestry segmentation, and the Fortune 1000 buys this data set from us, and they say, laptops and lattes, I could sell this to them, and they live here. And that's a very well-known, 3-decade-old, what's it called anyway? There's a segmentation of demographics. And the segments, which are geographically definable, are predictable, right? So laptops and lattes buy the New York Times, they go to Starbucks, they do this, they do that, they do that. So we basically are attempting here with qualitative data to mush it together and come up with some kind of segmentation. It's a little shaky yet statistically. We got work to go, right? No, but we're getting there. I want you to get the idea more than the results.
So your segments are
Biotomes in a
by
way?
the
Ecosystem-
the ecosystems,
ecosystems, yeah.
not the people.
This term is now called
Not-
an
not broad enough.
ecophysiological
Okay.
facetation of the planet. And so let's just assume that there's 1,000 of these. And they also, instead of buying laptop, and instead of buying this or that, they have ecosystems that have ecosystem services and characteristics that we could say if you grow corn, say here, and it does very, very well. This is really building on really fundamental Australian research, land typing, land systems, CSIRO, Stuart Christian, the whole history, right? It's actually since World War II, that's where they did it. So this is facetation or land systems for the whole planet. So I've spent a lot of time on this, but I just want you to know that all this data is available to really all of you because it's all coming out in ArcGIS Online as services, but it's also, you can download this whole data set for the whole planet and begin to characterize things and do things with it. So one of them is that you could do suitability, capability assessments on this. You could say pick the best place for the 10 cities that Carl's talking about scenarioizing, or let's say that let's say that this becomes the ecological, physiological framework, and we also have an equal one with population and land use, that we say we have 3 scenarios, megacities, middle cities, little cities, and we scattered them on the globe based on eco-physical characteristics. What I'm trying to get across is that all the data is now available.
We
And
can
it's
give it to our friends in Sweden and have them build the block world anew on top of it.
Yeah.
Right, whatever.
No, that's
But
Or
this
the
is quite
ecosystem
quite a serious topic. All of this data is available to all of you who are doing either research or planning. But we could do it with a scenario of a geodesign workshop where we would both, this is the step 1 and step 2 and possibly step 3 of your process. And we heard from Noel, one of the evaluation models, which is climate change. There would be others, of course, which would be rooted out of this. But what I'm saying is that what we've done in what you have done in micro scales or regional scales, many of you, could now be done for the whole bloody globe
Continental and
because
global.
continental, national, but the whole world.
Well, yeah.
And at 250 meters, that's a hell of a lot higher resolution than you did in Delmarva or Boston. So realize that we've got all the data. So we got all the data, we have models, we have actually this can be updated by Landsat every month if we wanted to.
Incredible.
So we've got all the data, we've got the process thinking. Now, we can't bullshit around, about that. Let's get with it and start
Use
applying
it.
these models in various applications at all scales.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, this kind of builds on Karen Siderellis' view of a national plan 100 years later, or the Warren Manning idea.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
we do either a national plan or a global plan using this as the base.
I've talked to John Jarvis at Park Service about building the Obama's grand finale, double the national park system. Anybody that wants to volunteer for that project, I'm happy to have them here.
And there's a good base map for planning it on.
Yeah.
This is the interpretation thing that we could use, and there's 28 layers thick. We just need to get the models and sketching, so you could use Geo Planner to do the design quickly, sketch out his plan, because you've got all the data. You could do it in a workshop in a month or 2 and give it to the president and say, look, these are the lands that you should buy, not buy, but you should simply flip into national parks like Carter did without guidance and like Clinton did without guidance. You've now got the guidance. You just need the inspiration and the wherewithal to do it. So that's the point of that story.
We have the data, we now need the determination and the disciples, and there's the disciples.
And we have, at least in this country, a president that's likely to do it.
Right.
If he's given the right science underneath it.
Now, he might do it without it, and that wouldn't be so good.
Well, he's got presidential, he's still got
Right.
this sort of president, which is
Right.
what Carter and Clinton did
Might as well
They did
guide
it.
it.
with, he's got this sort of, what is it called, presidential?
Executive.
Executive order, that's how they did it. So he just needs the guidance. So don't you
Yeah.
think you should get
Gonna
off?
send him this map?
No, I'm sending it to you to get inspired to, let's build that plan. That's a real achievable plan. So we got now 2 projects. One of them is let's build the national park plan for this president quickly. And the other one is this more abstract thing of Knowles, of let's work with JPL to look if we could do a geodesign project with them and take on the world. And then think of the story that would happen out of that in national press or global press if you said, I mean, just climate change itself gets so much noise. Suppose that there were actually people thinking about the urbanization footprint for the next 100 years and which way it should be done and what are the impacts of that.
Actually, the first question might be, does it matter if 1 billion people are on the green in this map or on the red of this map?
Yeah, well, yeah, because this is the structure for evaluation models as well as Knowles, more complex evaluation systems, yeah.
We talked a little bit in the pre-workshops about the relationships between education and research. And one of the things that occurs to me about Kelleann's work is that in a way she has the people of the place at grand scale. And somehow connecting the people you're getting from Siberia, and we all saw little interesting places on the map.
Yeah.
That's the start of the people of the place. And if we have tools such as GeoPlanner that are globally distributed by default, we have a kind of interesting pathway there. Because you've shown interest, we have science, again, we're trying to connect these things, but
I asked Greg in the hallway just before coming in here if GeoPlanner is available to all the universities. He said, yeah, that's all available free. It's part of the site license and all this data as well. So all the tools are there, all the data is there. And then getting that into exercises in schools to begin to do this might be, it just is something to think about as one of the, could we next year come back and see real leveraging of that stuff,
Yeah.
Not that the other things that you want to do aren't important, but it's just some more content
Yeah.
and methods.
It's great. Let's do it. Okay, good. Thank you, Jack.
One more grand challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's an opportunity. Let's get the audience.
Noel, did you want to say anything? You
Yeah.
were talking to me. Why don't you come
Have
down
we
and join
taken
us
his name in vain?
Noel, do you want to join us down here or stay up there?
I'd just say from here that I'm actually really pleased that I was able to inspire some reactions from my talk and from the sort of potential of the things that we can do and this global view of change and Jack's idea to sort of go down to very local levels and then come back up again and go down again for that matter. So it's very exciting stuff, and watch this space, I suppose, and we'll get cracking on it. Thanks.
Great. Other thoughts? Comments? What'd you think of this summit? I thought it was the best yet.
Yeah.
So,
we have our standard little list. Do you want to do this again next year?
yeah.
Who will come next year?
And bring a friend.
Yeah, tell others.
Not too many, though, because the room is now full.
Yeah, but look at half the seats are empty.
Or bring 12 students. That's a good precedent.
Yeah, that's right.
The other question is, these are good ideas, this is good sharing, this is a good start. How do you deal with the issue of diffusion of these ideas? I mean, there are some books, there are some classes, there are programs. I mean, I would like to hear some ideas from the audience about what can you do to get 100 people knowing about geodesign next year rather than just sticking in our own little dirt ball of existence here. Not that that isn't.
No, I'm doing my part.
Okay, yeah, I was
You
gonna
are,
say, you've done well.
You've done it very well, but
Yeah.
I'm interested in what other people have as ideas.
Juan Carlos?
Juan Carlos, do you want to jump in on that?
No, I don't know if it's specifically to that, but I had just a suggestion for next year that I think it was posed by Stevens in Mike's presentation. By organizing the 4 circles of Carl's diagram, I think it will be useful or perhaps challenging to us to try to organize also presentations around those intersections that they looked at. Or perhaps some of those questions. I think the easiest way to organize it for next year is try to force ourselves to explore these questions at the light of those specific intersections between design, technology, science, and people.
Right.
Great.
It would be nice to have, for instance, or push the boundary to have actually people that are not GIS literate presenting the challenges that they have in intervening to a geodesign process. Or have the only perspective of a technical sort of GIS person, or have the one of a designer that has never touched GIS, or confronted in front of us to some of these things. It's in this desire to look at how things fail rather than succeed that perhaps we can apply a little of the research sort of scientific framework into testing and trying to, through failure, get closer to what we could say something that will work.
I think it's a great idea, so why don't you work with this guy over here and work
I
on
know
the
you,
agenda?
Jack,
You're
I know you were going to
volunteer.
say
I
that.
really appreciate all of your ideas, so
I'll
put 'em
be
to action.
happy to. I'll be happy
Okay,
to.
you
know,
two
I
guys
did
team up.
I did a little mental exercise that I didn't share with you while I was reconstructing the Venn diagram. And I said to myself, what's it like if you take any one of them out? What do you have if you have just the people of the place and the geographic sciences and the information technology, but no design? What if you have no people of the place? Think about those in your own way, because it helps to understand what is geodesign and how is it different from anything else that we've talked about.
Right. Carl?
What you would have is models in which policy is tweaking the description of existing systems. And if tweaking the existing systems produces a downward trajectory of the performance of those systems, even if
You'd
you
never
twist
know it.
them, you have no way of saying, what do we do now? And that's where we are right now.
That's right.
Jack, you asked what education
Paul,
are
go ahead.
doing. One of the things we're trying to get done at the University of Florida is every freshman that enters the University of Florida takes some unique classes that they all have to take. We're very close to getting spatial reasoning, spatial thinking into that order. So that 6,000 to 8,000 students every year for the next few years are going through. The attempt to do that is to get people to understand how geodesign might provide significant answers to the questions and what I like about Carl's diagram, I can take all 4 of those, and when I leave this place after being pumped up for 2 days on this kind of stuff, I leave this place with the idea that we might finally have hit a methodology by which we will know what the unintended consequences are of our designs. What is a good unintended consequence that we take credit for often and we didn't really know we were going to do it? And what are the negative unintended consequences? Which are the things that drive us nuts and what generally is causing us much of the problems that we have right now? So I leave this place with the idea that hopefully geodesign research and geodesign methodologies and geodesign applications and the people that are using geodesign applications and methods and research will finally begin to vision and understand what the unintended consequences were of the planning before it actually turns out to be something that is for real. So thank you guys, all of you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Kent?
I work with a little school in sandwiched between Glacier Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness with, I think, 24 students, and they have a Connect Ed collection, and they're building a forest stewardship plan for their school. And one of our goals is like GIS Day in November to get all the rural kids across Montana to map parks, because we don't have that kind of infrastructure in the rural part of the country. So, and they multiply. You know, they get their parents involved, they get their grandparents involved. I think it's a good way to kick some of this off.
And
I
now
have
if
a-
it's
I have
in
a
the
question
schools,
about that.
right? If the schools
Yeah.
don't have access, they can do it
All,
with
all schools
yeah.
currently in the United States, but we're looking at the whole world, have access, all schools have an account or are eligible for an account, and Amazon has backed us up with free cloud computing to use ArcGIS Online for free in student projects.
So they can do your parks with that,
Exactly.
yeah.
So you're already using it.
Yeah.
I have a really very specific question. Would those same kids use GeoPlanner?
Yeah.
So if we added, I don't know if Greg's here,
He might
Over
not want
there.
to.
Yeah, but they're pointing, there, he's up there, yeah.
I mean, we could have the grant as a special item or a phase 2 of the overall grant, add GeoPlanner to the Connect Ed grant through the White House. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah,
That's an interesting
Yeah.
idea.
great idea.
Yeah. So that gets them at the young age.
Yes, right.
Kids
I mean-
love to draw.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
kids are, I mean, this Will.I.Am school, I'm just personally involved in quite a bit. Those kids got up on stage in front of all the governors about 2 months ago, and they presented some of the best PhD quality level research I've ever seen. I mean, there's
Yeah.
I mean, this was just 2 months ago. They were, relationship between pollution and breast cancer, gangs and grade scores, just like shocking. And these governors, this was a policy conference of all the governors. You know, Jerry Brown was there, all of them were there, and they were just, where did you get these kids? You know, and Will said, he's very audacious about education. You guys have just been doing the wrong thing. Get your money into these kids instead of spending money on basketball or on this or like that.
That's right.
Grow these kids, you know.
That's right.
And
That's great.
so yeah, so you run that thing in Montana? That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, to me, that's really the generation that we have to hit, is get them to do geodesign in a simplified form, like Greg's application or other ones just like it. This would rock.
Yeah. Tim?
Thanks, Sam. Stephen, you posed a question about what would the, I suppose, topic be like without one of the circles in the Steinitz 4 bubbles there. I pose an open call to anyone here, actually as a practical way, just step outside the center circle. There are all kinds of opportunities out there to situate wherever someone is, somebody's interest in the world. But the big challenge for us, of course, is to bring in all of the other sciences. And if, in a sense, we were a little flexible with that geographic information sciences circle and just open it up to geography. So if you open it up just to geography as a sense, that brings in everybody, because the anecdotal phrase of geography is everybody in the world, and that's how anecdotally it's used. So that anybody here could, and a group, as a group, maybe we should crowdsource that entire thing. Let's put that diagram up and then start to allow anybody to put something up there as a topic. This is somebody in the world is doing this kind of a thing, and that means that we can situate where geodesign is and everything else that is being done. So how to move these other subject matters, these people that have a particular focus on something in the world, maybe they're in 3 of the circles, but not quite in the 4th one yet. So it helps people to understand they can move more toward the center by just taking on that 4th circle a little bit here and broaden their perspective.
Carl?
Two things. If you read my book carefully, I defined that blue dot as neither geography nor any particular set of sciences, but I included a whole bunch of things provided that they had a geographical focus. I think Stephen interpreted that absolutely correctly. Furthermore, I don't think anybody's going to be in the middle, really. I don't think that's the aim. I think that basically everybody ought to know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. Right? If you know a lot about a little, you're at the edge of that diagram. If you know a little about a lot, you're in the middle. But if only you know a little about a lot, you may not be very effective.
Yeah. I think a strength of this is that you've hybridized most of the people. They're two
I think
colors.
everybody's hybridized.
Yeah, just about everybody.
Everybody's
Yeah.
hybridized.
Which is,
Otherwise, they'd be a highly specialized person going vertically through the world instead of vertically and horizontally through the
It's a
world.
matrix, really.
Well, it's fundamental.
requires matrix management.
It's the three-dimensional thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me add something. What Paradis did at Northern Arizona, the year after the first conference, the second conference, I thought was a very smart move. He put all the faculty into that diagram, and
Yeah.
it was a brilliant move. And I've recommended that to several universities. And I think that teaching the elementary schools is really important, but I think teaching the faculties that they're not organized right is really important. So what I like to do is I like to go to a place for 3 days with a mixture of faculties and politician types on a real problem and figure out how they work together and force that situation. Because I don't know anything about nuclear radiation, but I use it in my case studies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christina. You have a lot of data that is at a global, when you see it at global, worldwide, it's at a regional scale, and when you're doing design projects, you need it at a very small scale. At a campus level, you might be looking at plus or minus 2 foot accuracy, but when you get down to design, you're looking at sub-centimeter accuracy. I know there's a lot of discussion with working with the surveying community and having a really good monument-based work from. But is there any way that you can communicate the quality of information that already exists locally by maybe using boundaries or something, and then through GIS communicate the level of the quality of that information and the precision of the data that's available?
A map like this, but that shows the data texture, so to speak, at every one of those 250. Yeah, interesting question.
Well, no, you're talking about the accuracy of the,
Boundaries of cities, for example, and the precision of the data that a city might have, and the quality. For example, at Stanford, when we were trying to, in the 90s, when we were trying to just get aerial photography, we made a boundary of every survey project that had been done to date, so we could see where we had what quality of information, and we could show that we really need the whole campus, all of the lands, not just the core campus.
It's metadata.
Yeah,
I mean, you
it's
have,
a map of metadata.
just take, for example, ArcGIS Online has 3 million maps. And how do you find out about which one's appropriate for you? It's the metadata stamps and then the stars rating, like Amazon star rating, what's good for what. So, yeah, it's a fundamental part of both geographic science and the implementation of that in GIS.
And it's
metadata
constantly
stamps.
evolving in real time.
Yeah, it is. Do you guys like librarians?
Yeah. Yes.
They're sweet.
I work closely with a librarian.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you really do, don't you? Santa Barbara's going to start a new project, which is to put ArcGIS Online in the library. They're trying to create a spatial library, spatial campus, spatial thinking, like you are at Minnesota.
Right.
And they're putting the focus on cataloging all student projects, all maps, all data, through a geographic lens and being able to allow people to mash things up. This is very cool.
Yeah.
very cool.
I mean, it sounds very simplistic, you just do this, but the implications of it, when I look at this series of circles, all of those circles, in a way, you might say, exist on the campus. Who's the curator when we're talking just about the academy, how you bring it all together? The traditional person to bring it all together was the library and the librarian. And I'm starting to realize that inside of enterprise GISs and these large organizations like NGA or USGS, or the librarian role of curation of the access and integration of this information is going to be increasingly important.
I think GIS is eventually going to replace the Dewey Decimal System. It'll be a new way to organize our knowledge about the world. But
Well,
that's
it'll be
just a
one
hunch.
dimension of it, but I just really want to acknowledge that this field and bringing the different pieces together requires somebody who, I
Knows how to
keep hunting,
organize,
who's
yeah.
the existentialist reflective person.
Dana Tomlin.
Thank
you, Dana.
So,
We have a question up here. Go ahead.
Hi, it's kind of a comment. Hi, I'm Sheila Steinberg from Brandman University. And I've been involved with GIS since the 90s when I learned about it at Penn State as a grad student. And I really love this diagram. And I think that this is my first time coming to this conference. I think it would be great to organize some interest groups around the 4 areas, and especially from a research agenda standpoint, from a honing in on the methods. Like, I would love to be in the people in place and getting into that, measuring the localized culture and integrating that in with some of the other areas. So I think that might be a great way to get people to plug in next year, or even develop that online, however you want to do it. And also, I think that putting out the call about what this group is, because I didn't even really know what it was, but I feel like there are many of us out there who are doing geodesign and we don't know it. So get that word out to like the sociologists, the anthropologists, you know, all the ologists, pull them in, because it's a great thing and you want to share the word. So excellent job. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Good. Do we have here? Where?
I think I'm.
Hey, John.
Hey. You know, I think I was encouraged a lot by some of the last comments in this last presentation. I live or work at the intersection of water and fire, and you know, all the standard California things. And I really see a need, as I see City Engine developing and these interactive design tools developing, for more ecosystem services, biomimicry type of rules bases or something. I noticed as last year, the redesign of Redlands was putting in palm trees, and I was looking up on my map as to whether that was a fire danger zone or not. Right? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that's just where I am. And you know, on the projects that we're working on, we really need to encourage groundwater recharge in LA and saving the stormwater that we have. Economists say, you know, what you can't measure, you know, we did a napkin measurement, and $3 billion worth of water go out to the sea every year from the Los Angeles River. And so it's kind of this, how do you help us, you know, bring these tools to everyone so that when they're designing a parking lot, they're looking at infiltration basins, or designing a street, they're putting an infiltration gallery underneath. I don't know how we bridge that. Thank you.
It's a policy piece.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I mean, we still have some integration that has to happen here, but yeah.
What comes up for me when you talk is that this technology that we're playing with is terribly, terribly simplification technology compared to the way the natural world really works. Isn't that true? I mean, the city engine isn't close to the real world. And the other thing that you said, which is interesting, is that how do you make geodesign, how do you integrate geodesign, that is the decision and the evaluation of a design, into the transaction space of the way people make the more micro scales? Not the designer, but the guy who's doing, you know, where do you put your foot almost? Not where do you build your house, where do you do where do you put the grate, where do you pave, where do you not? Driving geodesign out of the notion of the designer, but into the way that most of the world actually gets built. It isn't built by designers, it's built by transaction people. So this is, ultimately I think the cloud gives us the opportunity for that, but the tools are not there. Building the app that is more simplified. It says, if you do this here from a menu, this is going to be the consequences, and you've got it in an app in your device, and it's taking the fundamental concepts of Carl's methodology, but driving it right down into the personal app of transaction land.
And this is one of the aspects of interoperability that is so key, the interoperability between the designer and the transaction. That's important.
But didn't we see with Ron, with the widgets, and that's why we use it as a case study in geodesign, that's at the site level. They were placing buildings and the impact on, and you could put whatever widget you want. I don't know that you had water in there. I think they were looking at carbon issues and jobs and some economic figures. So that was at the site scale. And the choices they were making, and it was giving real-time feedback on that little widget dial on what you were just doing as you were creating your designs. So I think, and I think Joe said it earlier, and he was crediting you, that you make it visual and people, you know, bring it alive graphically and map it. If they see those billions of dollars going out into the ocean, you know, that starts to really send a sign that starts to get into your brain and starts to impact then the policy and the people.
Go ahead, Carl.
The reason there are 4 boxes on that diagram, which I thought of in the middle of the night one night, is not just about collaboration, it's also about responsibility. You asked a very clear question. Why does somebody not do something? That's not the responsibility of the science or the technology. That's the responsibility of the people first, and the designer, it could be the people or a designer, or somewhere in between those two. I don't want a tool that tells me I must do something, because I may be in a situation where getting rid of the water is exactly the right solution, all right? So the tool itself has to be in some ways neutral to the science and the people of the place, because those sciences might reverse in some geographies at some scale and in some circumstances.
It reveals the choices.
The technology has to be able to adapt to those circumstances, those people in those places. But the people in those places have to make the decision, and it's their responsibility. And it's an educator's task, not a technologist's task, to convince them to do that. It's very important. I think there's a great difference between these 4 people and what they contribute to collaboration, but there's also a difference in what they're really responsible for.
That in your 6-part diagram, Carl, is what a lot of people, I think, don't get, which is the difference between a process model and an evaluation. And the process model is fundamentally the science model. It's erosion, tons of dirt per hectare per year. And the evaluation is that too much erosion?
And it might
And
be and it might not be.
one of the challenges, I think, when I see some of these tools is that distinction is actually ambiguous and embedded deeply in the technology. As a simplification often, feels simpler to just say tons of erosion, let's go straight to the decision. And that awkwardness actually is a lot of the reason why these tools don't get used, because people want to have the local autonomy to consider that factor and 3 others.
That's right.
Before making
10
the
others,
decision.
actually.
Or 10 others.
Yeah.
But it's challenging. For example, city engine rules, I mean, that there's currently not an interface that distinguishes between the decision part of that and the science part of that.
Jerry Caden, a colleague and friend at Harvard, argues against setting back the building from the sidewalk. In Europe, moving buildings to the sidewalk is now the popular thing to do. So the interpretation of the values can't be standardized. It can't be. The scale can't automatically go red or green. It has to be part of the setup of the project in the first place, which means the project structure has to be an empty box which people have to fill for whatever scale, culture, and locality they are.
But making sure it's a diversity of disciplines around the table.
It has to be a diversity, it has to be a difference, but the technology itself has to enable diversity.
That's right.
And it does. I mean,
It does.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
I'm not arguing that, but
Absolutely.
sometimes it doesn't.
I think what he was saying is that the rules are all about urban forms, not the richness of the natural processes. You know, plants, God, they're incredibly complex compared to a building.
And that's the how do we bring in those ecosystem services that
Right.
we've discussed
Right.
as needed?
Well, that's why I use the term ecosystem services,
Yeah.
actually, because that is exactly that, the encapsulation of science and values. That's
Right.
both things in one, which is why I think it's actually kind of
And
the
those
formulation
do
we're looking
vary
for.
because they're related to where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, a little while ago, I talked about a vision of having all the data that we have. I mean, it's the first thing, right?
That's,
Very good.
yeah.
So is that going to get worse or better,
Is what going to get worse?
the data? Better. It's going to get better. We're going to continue
Yes,
measuring
yeah, of course.
everything. We're going to continue measuring everything that moves and changes in all dimensions.
Yeah.
That's very decisive statement. Okay. This little thing,
Real time.
the app holder, is going to be everywhere. So somebody's going to figure it out, how to connect that data with this app holder and build cool apps that are transaction focused for the individual. So geodesign will be automated in such a way that you can actually, I mean, I'm not talking about geodesign, I'm talking about this notion of taking data, running it through a quick process, bringing it up on my screen. Do I go left or I go right? It's already done in auto navigation, but it's going to be done in the way that people build things. Do I build my house here or should I move it over a little bit? There'll be tools or apps, geo apps, that make it easier. And it's going to bypass in many ways the traditional design professions and get right in the hands of the contractor or the individual. I'm hoping.
For
So
better or
that
for
people
worse.
start, what?
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse,
right.
but it's natural. I mean, technology doesn't have
Right.
it's evolving, right?
No, this idea of locational awareness, which is what I'm putting,
Right.
is the permeating thing in our technology culture right now.
Locational awareness, all devices are locationally aware. What's going to happen is they'll have contextual information about location. This little zip code describer, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
It's very cool. You can type in your zip code and you find out whether you're living in a laptop in latte land. So I type in my location and it tells me what ecosystem type is there. And the rules behind what I can do or not do in there may vary by culture, but there'll be some that deal with like ecosystem services, don't screw that up. So that information is going to go right into the individual's brain and people will make decisions differently. I can only hope that that will happen fast enough, to be honest.
Well, I hope that there's great wisdom in the corporate people who made those maps that tell you whether you're doing better or worse.
That's not the maps, that's the rules that live between the maps and human behavior.
But those rules are going to be what's going to be on your phone. And if you go up the scale toward Noel's scale, the ways in which you decide those policies are not going to be the same as the way somebody working on this level is going to decide where to camp or to put a house.
Yeah.
Well, and one
That's the problem that I raised in at least my research
Right,
question.
but
I don't know what those ways are, but I know they're not the same.
But one possibility that helps is to get a diversity of those, right? Get a diversity of opinions, and you decide. Give me the evidence why you think that.
That's what I
decide.
want to
think
do
that's-
is.
I think that's an important part of
Yeah,
it.
you can have multiple sets of rules. You
Sure.
have the green rules and the red rules.
Yeah.
You have the blue rules and whatever. So you could just download your rules and that's the way you behave.
I hope that in the next short time, a group of professionals and academics informally agree to do similar things different ways and different things similar ways, and can report on, my school took the same scale type problem that your school did. We did it this way in our climate. You did it the same way in your climate. Did climate matter? And it's not so hard to do. There are about 40 schools represented here, and all of us teach some kind of studio type thing. Just organize it, for God's sakes. I said that
So
3
Bill
years
Miller
ago.
had a great word. You know how words stimulate ideas? Remember this, Bill? You call it geo-accounting. Geo-accounting, accounting for all the things that really matter, as opposed to economic accounting. Of course that matters too. Geo-accounting might be the frame within which all of these 40 schools or 50 schools do their things and we geo-account for it. And this is a new ecological infrastructure for accounting and knowing. I mean, we know that corn or this kind of development or this kind of city happens here and here, and we aggregate it up. We have an accounting framework for the planet for the first time. Not national boundaries, not city-states, not politically driven things, not watersheds, but something that actually is the whole ecosystem unit. The whole philosophy of Stewart and Christian brought alive.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, we've kept everyone a little bit later than we expected, but thank you so much. You've been a great audience. We love your thoughts, your questions, and Carl, Jack, Mike, Stephen, Kelleann, and really everybody who's taken part in this. This is always such a great gathering every year, and let's continue this conversation. Let's see if we can't move some of these research agendas forward, and see you here next year. Yeah, thank you. Shannon, absolutely. Yes.